Computer. Hey everyone, it's Laura Lawrence from Mind Body Balance, and I'm welcoming with me today for this coffee and conversation bit, Chris Beaudry. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
So I invited Chris to hop on and chat with me because I'm working from home now. Chris is working from home. Most of us are working from home. And there's been some big shifts in many of our lives. And with those big shifts have come a lot of big emotions. And so I invited him today on this conversation piece with me to address the emotion of grief. I invited Chris because I know that he, about a year ago, introduced a Rise Together grief support group for himself and to help those that he knew that were going through that emotion and navigating the journey to healing. And so, Chris, why don't we start by telling me a little bit, or telling everybody a little bit about that group, where the inspiration came from, and then we'll head into looking at what's happening now in the world and address grief from that aspect.
Sure. Yeah, my sister and I started Rise Together in August of 2018 after the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. I was the assistant coach of the team that time, and I found there was nowhere to relate to people with grieving. There was nowhere to share. And I knew that in sharing and relating, that helped the healing process. So we dove deep into a lot of Kubler-Ross's work, a lot of other grief work, and built a platform or a structure to work through different stages of grieving, and to do that with others who are maybe further along, so that you can see that there is hope in grieving, because hope and healing work hand in hand together. When you first get hope, you get a little bit of healing. Once you have a little bit of healing, you gain a little more hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what did you find? I know that you've hosted many of these Rise Together group meetings, and what's been your experience with working and relating to people through this process of grief and healing and hope?
Well, I can only speak from my experiences, because one, the confidentiality of the group, but again, that's all I can ever, I know is my own experience. And I know when someone shares something and it touches a part in me that's still hurting, I feel safer to share. And it helps move me to a point of acceptance a lot quicker. You can go through anger, you can go through denial, bargaining, all the stages, if you want to say the stages, smoother, maybe quicker, but in the end, it really helps you get to a point of acceptance, because acceptance is the goal with any type of change, with grief or change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when I've followed, some of your sharing with grief, you talk about acceptance, right? And you talk about,
My dad's walking in the shed right here.
oh,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Just on his call. Oh, I want some breakfast. Oh, okay. Ask your question again.
So when I've followed much of your, I guess, experience, and when you share about grief, what really I think resonates with me is that it's not just limited to one certain type of experience, right? Often we just assume that, those who lost a loved one are the only ones who really experience that emotion and that process of grief. So can you share a little bit about that? Because I think that is a really important piece for everybody to understand.
Absolutely. To me, grief is no more or no less than the change in an ordinary pattern. So it's no more or less than a change in a familiar pattern. Well, if that's true, then we have pattern changes or familiar changes daily. And we want to put that in context to right now, everything. Everybody is grieving on some level right now, with it being having to stay home, not being able to go out, not seeing loved ones, et cetera, et cetera. And in any type of grief situation, it's moving through those stages and getting to acceptance. Now, change itself is a type of grief. Those who do not accept change grieve it. They grieve who they were before change was there, because we found a space of comfort. We enjoyed what we had when we do not have that now. Well, if you go through that without accepting change, you're going to be grieving your whole life. So I look at this as an opportunity to accept the unending changes of life, to look at how little we actually control, and then find a softness, find that space where we can look at life and say, yeah, I don't control the virus. I don't control when I can go to work. I don't control a lot of this, but I can control what I'm accepting, and I can accept this situation. And not a lot is different for me when you have acceptance. Oh, got to pause again.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So when we don't accept change, we grieve, and we can grieve in just looking at Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving. I mean, we can bargain. We talk to ourselves, oh man, if I could go to town, if I was safe and I did this and I took these steps, that's a form of bargaining. We
Mm-hmm.
could get to anger, which everyone is familiar with already. There are people, oh, my kids' hockey, they had a chance to win, or oh, how am I going to pay my bills? Damn government, damn this. Again, you're grieving. You could look at the depression side of it, where people now, after a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, are getting to a point of depression. They're feeling lost. They're feeling scared. And that is a part of grief when really, if you sit with these feelings, don't push them away. Don't try to make up a story around them, because the story is just keeping you further away from acceptance. And actually, the telling yourself a story is a part of grief. That is another aspect that just keeps you locked in one of the stages, because grief is cyclical, and the stories are what keep us cycling back through anger, through bargaining, through depression, through all the other stages. And it's shock. I mean, we had shock to the initial first stage of grief when we first found out, oh, I can't go to work. Oh my God. What happens? Well, yeah, you're grieving, but accepting the situation, being kind to yourself, and seeing how grateful you are, like just for you and I right now, living in rural Saskatchewan, in one of the least populated places in the world.
Right.
We're in the best scenario, So be grateful for that. Be grateful for all the time you spend with your family right now that you didn't. Everyone's been looking for a 2-week vacation, maybe not at home, but you have it. You have this time. And notice the patterns you create, your grieving patterns. They are cyclical, because these are how you're living when you're not in this quarantine. This cycle of anger, this cycle of depression, this cycle of bargaining is how you live your day-to-day life. Nothing is really any different right now, because you're just reliving your same patterns. If you get to a pattern of acceptance and gratitude, and it doesn't matter if we're in a quarantine, and it doesn't matter if we go back 2 months from now to how life was, you're going to be grateful and accepting of the changes, the daily changes that happen.
So I know that there's going to be some people watching this or listening to this that'll be like, you know what, Lauren, Chris, really great. In a utopian world, let's all just live like that, right? You know, accept and be grateful and thankful. And if it was as easy as that, we would all be doing that, right? We have this triune brain that hijacks our higher level, executive thinking brain. And so that is where the problem lies. And right now, there's a lot of people, I think their big chunk of stress and grief is coming from the uncertainty with their financial security, right? At least that's what I'm hearing now that we're 7 to 10 days in. So what would you, even speaking from your own experience, what would you suggest, for some strategies or, thought patterns for those that are listening, that really that is where their heads are at right now?
I think when it comes to financials, everyone who's dealing with this right now is everyone. The people who work at the banks, the people who work at lending institutions, everyone knows the situation. They're not going to come in and take away everyone's home. I try to stay grounded and focused on the day that I'm at. I'm not looking into, well, what's going to happen if this lasts for 6 months or 2 months or a year. If it does, we'll deal with that in a year, in 6 months. Look at today. When you get pulled out into the future is when things go bad. That gets that stinking thinking going. What ifs? Oh, if this happens, if that happens. What happens in your body when you do what ifs? Fear, anxiety, panic come up. When you're in the day and you realize right now, okay, I can get through today. There's food in the fridge. There's this, or we have money. We're okay. And for those, I know there are a lot of people who don't. There are some who have zero in the bank account right now that don't have and maybe do not have money. That's where the others who have plenty need to help everyone else out. You know, the government's announced programs, I believe $2,000 a month for those who are affected by work. Those are great, but right now, if you have family or friends who have no food, who have no money, and you are sitting on extra, this is a great part of being gracious for what you have, is spreading it around them. Help others that maybe need a hand right now. And it's going to return to you in some form later. I mean, this is what, yeah, we can't be face to face, but we can still be connected. If you know somebody who's struggling, be that support, that connection for them. Help them out because they're going to remember that and it's going to come back in some form for you.
Yeah, I love that mantra, right? I shared that in my personal group of the one day at a time. And I think it really resonates with people. It's hard to do though, because again, when I do a lot of my instruction with, healthy brain integration, when most of us are very left brainers, we live in the egoic mind, right? Unless we're practicing mindfulness, meditation, being grounded and present, because the left brain really can't conceptualize time in the present. We're always either in the past or the future. And so that's why, we love to talk about, encouraging people to do mindfulness practices, grounding practices, being in the present moment, using your right brain, because then it's easier to take one day at a time, right? And I love what you suggested. It seems so simple, and it is, but very impactful of, it's time for us to like step up and help those who need to be helped if we are sitting more comfortable. So I really, I appreciate you sharing that. So anything last thoughts you want to share with everyone who's listening or watching, on this whole current situation that we're experiencing? Because it really is universal right now. It's the entire world is experiencing it at a macrocosm level and also a microcosm level. So any last thoughts you want to share?
If you're not working right now and you're at home, you have a great chance to monitor the things that you're doing and how they affect the body, how they affect your mind. If you have a list of things that affect you negatively, start marking them down. Notice what gets you in the future, what gets you fearful, and limit those activities. And start looking for the ones that then maybe bring you to the present. They relieve that fear, relieve that anxiety, because we have this extra time right now. So use it. If it's baking bread, something you've always wanted to do, if it's starting a little greenhouse in a corner of your house where there's sun coming in, if it's having a long bath, playing with the kids, whatever it is, find those things that bring joy in your life and do them. Because what better time to do it than now? You're at home, can't work, do things that are fun. I mean, that's what this is about, life. I mean, humans aren't meant to live in the future obsessed with anxiety and bills and interest and mortgage payments and worrying about that. Humans are meant to live connected, happily, joyfully. So start a new pattern of doing that. And then if life gets back to what it was, I don't want to say normal because this is normal now. Then if it gets back to what it was, you can use these new patterns and these new connections to live a more joyful life.
Yeah, isn't that the truth that now more than ever we can see how attached we are to all of those masks and roles in our lives that really we identified most with? And now that they're gone, we are lost. And like you said, what's happening now is really what's meant to happen. I remember a client a few years ago said something, one of the most impactful things. She had lost her husband when they were in their 30s. He'd passed away of cancer. And, she just said to me, Laura, the biggest thing I learned was that work, my 9-to-5 job, felt like just a waste of life. It was a waste of my precious time. And so many of us, all we ever asked for and begged for and prayed for was extra time. And now we have it and we don't feel super comfortable with it. So it's working through those patterns, like you said. Hey?
Absolutely. I've worked with a fellow who runs a living and dying project in San Francisco. He's probably been with the most dying people in North America by the bedside with them, holding hands with them, being right there as they cross or through the days and weeks leading up to death. And one of the things he's told me many times was the biggest thing that people regret in the end was working too much, not doing the things in their lives that bring them joy. And it's a message you continually hear over and over and over. But everyone says, oh, not me though. I'll find the time. Oh, don't worry. I'll get ahead soon enough and be able to live happy. Well, why not start right now? Right now. Because none of us want to be laying in that moment going, I messed this one up. Oh, if I had a do-over, dang.
Yeah, I hear you and I feel you on that. And, my husband and I were just talking last night how we've felt the shifts after our children have worked through like the frustration and, those stages of grief. They've now actually there's been some like incredible growth in their own personalities, and their own ability to just decompress and connect and be present and do things that they really enjoy doing, not things that they feel like were part of their schedule and they always had to do, right? So it's definitely an eye-opening time. And so I want to thank you for joining me. This was a fantastic interview. I think this is a must listen for anyone who's experiencing any anxiety and worry and fear right now at this time. So I want to thank you for tuning in from your shop there. And I'm tuning in hoping my kids don't wake up. So thanks so much, Chris.